2 years ago, I started my game development journey. Since then, my game's changed a lot, and I've greatly improved my skills. My game is called Ascendant Dawn. It's a grand strategy game set in a Bronze Age world where you control a nomadic tribe. I chose to make a grand strategy game mainly because I like them, but also because there aren't many of them. The initial idea for AD was far more fantastical, featuring magic, fantasy races, and a different map. However, I started shifting AD setting fairly early on, as I created a desert environment, which I thought looked very good, and I was going to go for a much more mix of biomes instead of just a tundral environment. Then I started assessing if fantasy elements were something that belonged in AD at all. Elements such as magic and elves were quickly removed, but some very light fantasy elements such as mythical/mysterious beasts remained for much longer. The theme, the setting for AD in its early development was all over the place, from Stone Age to medieval. However, I eventually settled kind of in the middle and went for the Bronze Age, though it would take some time before I properly developed that aesthetic. I think this mirrors the original Mount & Blade's development. Mount & Blade originally was meant to have zombies and various other somewhat fantasy things, but it eventually settled on a realistic setting, just not on Earth, which is very similar to Ascendant Dawn. Now I'm going to show you the progression of Ascendant Dawn over time. So the version I have here is about the earliest version I have archived. It's very old and it's pretty ill-optimized. It's very laggy, the controls are terrible. And I have my earliest attempt at a landscape and some very blue water and a placeholder character, and there's basically just one or two buttons that actually work, and yeah, it's absolute placeholder. Nothing really is here yet, just some basic half broken buttons with some basic UI. This is a version from just a little later on, and it's got a very primitive main menu, some cultures to choose from, including fantasy races, but we'll just go with a normal one. And then you spawn in a desert environment, which, and this is when I started to diverge from going from that just solely tundral environments, and now I was experimenting with a desert, and there's some very basic movement. It's not got nav mesh or anything proper. There's some meshes, and these meshes actually stayed around for a very long time. There is an event when I go close to that object there, but I'll show you interacting with the settlement, or rather the placeholder for it. These are sandstorms, which, if you can look at them in the right way, look very good. This is one of the reasons why I like desert environments, but right now they don't work, and the controls and the FPS are horrific. And this is a settlement, very early iteration. I don't actually know what's happening here. So if I enter the settlement, I can choose to attack it. And that was the prelude for a lot of the features later on. This is a version from just about 2 years ago, and there's a bit more functionality in some of these buttons, with population being a thing. There's a year counter, and I broke it, so I'm just going to quit the menu and restart. Yeah, there's a few various things, but there's also camels, which, now that the nav mesh works, I can go and kill them and get their resources. This version of the game actually had a intro movie, but that's something I've largely cut out. It also had a new menu, and still, again, fantasy races, no custom creation. Also, you can see magic in there. This is pretty much the same, but there's authority starting to be a thing. Along with culture, with some very basic stuff, and also a tech tree, which was something I was working on. And there's also different game speeds, so if we those changed how fast everything moves. Oh yeah, and camels will also move around though they have no animations. This is a version from about 6 months after the first ones, and this main menu background is actually the same as it is right now, though it has a few different features, such as there were small camps at the spawning. There's also no fantasy elements left. And when we do load in, we'll be on the actual main map. Well, an earlier iteration of it. And we have I believe this is the second iteration of the UI, so we can see the golden outline with transparent backgrounds. And we can also interact with this tribe, though I won't. There's also various diplomatic functions, though they are very, very basic right now. We can see what resources in general, very much the beginning of how this game would start to look in the future. This is the first demo version, and it's only got the tutorial available. That's because the tutorial is the demo, essentially. It'll teach you how to play the game, and after that, you can, if you were to buy the game, you would then be able to play the game in full. And this is a lot more primitive than the tutorial right now. And there is advice. This is actually the second iteration of the tutorial, but it's the only standalone version. Controls are still a bit different, and there's a load of notifications coming up. And as I've got to just choose one of these. As you can see, there's a lot of like armies and settlers. It's just a earlier version of this where there were a lot of those. But this really develops later on in the project, so it's best to look at the later versions. This is another demo version, much later one. It has the up-to-date main menu background and the title screen UI. It also has a feature called the showroom, which I decided I didn't want in the end, which can show you various cities and nomads and whatnot of the different cultures. I decided not to add that. Well, I decided to remove it because it's simply not something I want to have. It would just spoil the game to some degree and is overall unnecessary, I believe. But if we go into the tutorial, that was an older background for loading screen. I started using meta-human portraits for the characters, and so there's now a proper tutorial. This is iteration 3 UI, which isn't the modern version, but overall this is a pretty modern version of the game. There's even seasons which cover everything with snow and later begin to have effects such as negative effects such as killing you. But this is an earlier version of the settlement UI, and you can do various functions, just stealing food. And overall, mechanically, this is relatively similar to the current version. This is the current build, the actual in-editor build, and it has a key map so people can see which keys to press. And it's still got the same menu. New artwork though, more Bronze Age themed. And so this is what it looks like right now. You can see a load of new textures and, for instance, deer. The deer herds now have multiple entities in them. And there's also, in the tutorial, I decided it wasn't big enough, so I'm going to make it larger. So I've added a desert area with a large city, and that will be the final goal of the tutorial. Can you defeat that city in some manner? And that will mark yourself as being utterly victorious. And winter's actually dangerous in this version, so we're at high winter right now, and if we hadn't slaughtered, we're losing a lot of people, but if we hadn't slaughtered those animals, we'd lose more because we have a load of textiles. So yeah. this is what the game looks like right now. There's also, there's sunrise, sunset, there's all of that, seasons, whatnot. Recently, I've started preparing to put Ascendant Dawn on Steam. I've been making some caption images, for instance. This is my main caption image. I'd love some feedback on this, and the best place is the Ascendant Dawn Discord, which is linked in the description. If you're at all interested in Ascendant Dawn, I'd recommend joining, especially as there is going to be a demo available on Steam soon. So please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.